Divine revelation, the miraculous rise, shocking fall, and transforming heart of a sacred king. In the 3rd year of Jehoiakim, the word of the Lord came to the prophet Samuel, commanding him to anoint a new king over Israel. The people clamored for a ruler to reign over them, longing for a king who would lead them like the nations around them. Yet, amidst the turmoil, God's gaze fell upon a humble shepherd boy in the fields of Bethlehem, David. Unbeknownst to the world, he would rise to become a shepherd of the nation, chosen to bring God's people into the fullness of his purposes. In those sunlit hills of Judah, David spent his days tending sheep, his heart entwined with the melodies of heaven. Strumming his harp, he poured out his praises to Yahweh, reflecting on the covenant promises made to his forefathers. These moments were sacred, for in his solitude, David found strength and intimacy with the Almighty. Little did he know, even as he watched over his flock, the weighty call of kingship rested upon his young shoulders, an anointing whispered in secret by Samuel. But as darkness loomed over Israel, a formidable foe emerged from the land of the Philistines. Goliath, a giant clad in armor, challenged the armies of Israel, sowing seeds of fear into the hearts of mighty men. Each day the ground trembled under his taunts, yet when all seemed lost, David stepped forward, ignited by faith. "The battle is the Lord's," he declared, armed not with sword or shield, but with a sling and 5 smooth stones. When he hurled that stone, God's power coursed through him, striking down the giant, and the earth erupted in celebration, a divine victory that ignited David's ascent in the eyes of the people. Elevated to the court of King Saul, David played sweet melodies to mend the torment of the king's troubled heart. The music held a weighty silence, echoing in the palace halls, yet within them festered Saul's envy. As songs of David's exploits spread, the refrain rang clear: "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s." With each note accompanying David's rise, Saul's darkness deepened, spiraling into a relentless pursuit to extinguish the light of the young hero. In flight, David found refuge in the wilderness, a barren land that echoed both despair and divine deliverance. He gathered a band of disillusioned men who would come to share in his trials, and in those harrowing moments, David learned the depths of reliance on God's timing and justice. The opportunities to avenge oneself against Saul were many, yet David, knowing his divine appointment, chose patience over vengeance. Each close call was a sculptor's hand, refining his character for the mantle ahead. Yet, as David ascended the throne and united Israel, the war was not just without, it raged within. Temptation emerged like a shadow, and in a moment of moral failure involving Bathsheba, the depths of sin were revealed. The consequences of his actions sent ripples through his household, marking the fall of a man who once stood firm in faith. Confronted by Nathan, David's soul was laid bare, and from his anguished heart flowed a plea for mercy in Psalm 51, a desperate call for renewal. Before we continue with this incredible biblical account, I want to make sure you don't miss any of these powerful scripture stories. Click the bell icon and select all notifications. These biblical narratives have transformed countless lives throughout history. If God's word through this story is blessing you, please like and share with someone who needs to hear about God's faithfulness today. Tell me in the comments which biblical story has most impacted your faith journey. I'm always amazed how God's word speaks to hearts across generations. Now, let's continue with what the Lord did next. As the storm brewed within, Absalom's rebellion ignited a fracturing fire within David's family. As he crossed the Kidron Valley, the weight of separation from Jerusalem pressed heavily on his heart. The Ark of the Covenant remained behind, a painful reminder of what once was. Yet through it all, David clung to the promises whispered by God, knowing that even amid turmoil, his faithfulness remains unbroken. The story of a shepherd king unfolds, inviting us into the depths of God's divine plan, one that unfolds through trials, failures, and the grace that forever calls us back into his arms. As David retreated from the splendor of his throne, the dust of the Kidron Valley rose beneath his weary feet, mingling with tears unspilled. The cries of soldiers and the wails of mourning echoed in the air, suffocating the remnants of his once glorious reign. Absalom, his own son, had usurped the throne, capturing the hearts of the people with charm and cunning. In the depths of his heart, David grappled with a tumult of emotions, pain, regret, and an unyielding love for the son who sought to overthrow him. Amidst the shadows of betrayal, David turned to his God, for he remembered the words of the psalmist, "The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear?" Psalm 27:1. In this hour of darkness, his spirit longed for the comfort of the Lord, recalling the covenant made with Abraham and the everlasting promises bestowed upon his lineage. But as he walked, he knew that the path ahead would not be easy. Meanwhile, within the walls of Jerusalem, Absalom reveled in his newfound power. Sympathetic to the desires of the people, he held court at the city gates, winning hearts with flattering words. "If only I were judge in the land, then every man who has a dispute could come to me, and I would give him justice," he proclaimed. 2 Samuel 15:4. Unbeknownst to him, the arrogance of rebellion cast a dark shadow over his spirit, pulling him further from the heart of God. As David made his way to Mahanaim, a company of loyalists emerged, rallying around him, among them Ittai the Gittite. David felt the weight of anguish as he implored, "Why should you come with us? Go back and stay with the new king, for you are a foreigner." But Ittai responded with a fierce loyalty, declaring, "As surely as the Lord lives and as my lord the king lives, wherever my lord the king may be, whether it means life or death, there will your servant be." 2 Samuel 15:21. In this moment, David recognized that even amid betrayal, God provided a remnant of faithfulness. These steadfast souls became his companions in this time of distress, and they fortified him in prayer and purpose. As the adversity swirled around him, David sought the face of the Lord in fervent prayer. "O God, save me by your name, vindicate me by your might." Psalm 54:1. His heart cried out for redemption, trusting that even in his darkest hour, God could redeem the brokenness that surrounded him. Yet, as Absalom's forces gained momentum, David understood that calamity would reach its zenith. The advice of Ahithophel, who counseled Absalom to pursue David swiftly, revealed the relentless nature of the trial. David's heart trembled, not for his life alone, but for the purity and future of Israel, knowing that the nation was wrestling for divine order. And while David depended upon the Lord's guidance, he appointed commanders to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. "Deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom," David instructed, a testament to his love intertwined with sorrow. 2 Samuel 18:5. At the appointed time, the armies clashed in the forest of Ephraim, where the hand of God would show his sovereignty in the chaos of conflict. But even then, in the liminal space between despair and hope, a whisper of God's plan lingered. The outcome would echo throughout generations, serving as a foundation for the coming kingdom. For even as David faced turmoil, the divine narrative was unfolding, hidden yet undeniable. As the battle raged on, who would stand at the helm of Israel's fate? Would the lines of loyalty be drawn in blood, or could grace once again find a way to reconcile? The story of David, steeped in sin yet adorned in mercy, continued to unravel, hinting at the greater purpose behind the struggle. What would the Lord orchestrate next in his sovereign plan? As the sun rose over the forest of Ephraim, the cries of battle pierced the air. The clash of swords and the thundering of hooves marked the unfolding tragedy. David's loyalists, though embattled, fought with the fervor of devotion, while Absalom's forces advanced under the banner of rebellion. Each warrior carried the weight of destiny upon him, knowing that the outcome would influence the fate of an entire nation. David, though a father burdened with deep sorrow, took his position on the high ground, seeking the counsel of his mighty men and offering up prayers to the Lord. "Lord, hear my cry," he lamented, his heart heavy with the anguish of what lay before him. "Do not allow my son to be lost to the treachery of his own spirit." Psalm 86, 6-7. In the midst of the turmoil, Absalom rode forth with bold arrogance, his golden hair flowing freely in the wind, a symbol of his vanity and pride. He sought to strike fear into the hearts of those who remained loyal to David. "Pursue him relentlessly," he commanded his commanders. The hunger for power blinded him, and the folly of his rebellion ignited the wrath of God himself. But as the battle took its toll, the forest became a formidable opponent. The Lord, in his sovereign wisdom, turned the tide against Absalom's forces. It is written, "The forest devoured more people that day than the sword." 2 Samuel 18:8. The very creation that stood witness to the sinful struggle began to enact judgment upon the haughty usurper. Through the chaos, God's hand guided a younger soldier, a man unaware of the momentous significance held within his actions. He saw Absalom hanging helplessly from the branches of an oak tree, his long hair caught in the thorns, a fitting imagery for his entanglement in pride. Overcome with fear and awe, the private soldier hesitated, for the charge of David's command weighed upon him. "Do I dare lay hands on the king's son?" he pondered in his heart. Yet Joab, the bold commander, upon learning of the situation, hurried to the young man. "You saw him and chose inaction? Would you not want to be rewarded with riches?" he demanded, inflamed by the necessity for action. With anguish in his heart, but loyalty to the commander pulling at his spirit, he struck Absalom down, the tragic consequence of rebellion enacted under the heavy hand of God's divine will. As the news spread like wildfire, David awaited word of the battle. A swift runner approached, battered but alive, his countenance revealing grim tidings. "Your son, Absalom, lies slain," he proclaimed. And with those words, the air turned thick with sorrow. David's heart shattered as he lamented, "O my son, Absalom! My son, Absalom! Would that I had died instead of you." 2 Samuel 18:33. The echoes of his mourning reverberated through the valley, piercing the hearts of his faithful men. Even in victory, there stood the tragedy of love shattered by rebellion. The weight of sin weighed heavily upon the throne. "How has it come to this?" whispered David, grasping at the threads of divine promise woven through his lineage, recognizing that even in sorrow, God remained sovereign. Amidst despair, a glimmer of hope emerged. A divine promise rested amidst the wreckage. For every tear shed and every soul lost spoke to a greater purpose unfolding, one that rested on the shoulders of a coming king, whispered through the ages. How would God's plan be revealed in this moment of brokenness? What future awaited Israel, even now when the heart of a father mourned deeply for the wayward son? Lo, the story continued to breathe, a testament that God's sovereign hand was at work, even in the ashes of defeat. For in the crucible of trial, the path to redemption was yet untold. What greater destiny awaited beyond the sorrows of this day? As the heart of David broke beneath the weight of grief, the skies churned with a foreboding presence. The murmurs of his followers grew quiet. The very ground upon which they stood breathed the despair of lost hope. They gathered, unsure of what next to speak or when to act, for the mourning of their king bled into every soul. Amid the looming sorrow, Joab sensed the need for direction. "My lord," he urged, stepping forth into the dim light, "rise, for we are not yet without purpose. The battle has turned, but the war for the kingdom remains. The enemies of the Lord will not cease their wickedness, and Israel still needs a king." His voice rang with urgency tempered by confidence. David glanced up, his eyes red and clouded with tears. "Shall we not mourn what has been lost?" he croaked, the rawness of the moment saturating his words. Yet deep within him, a flicker of understanding ignited. His kingdom, though divided by treachery, still awaited the promises of God. A deep silence fell like a moonlit shadow as Joab pressed further. "There is still a throne to defend, a legacy to uphold. You are the anointed of God. Absalom's rebellion, fueled by pride, has wrought its painful end. But we must rally now, lest our enemies take hold of our hope." With a bitter swallow, David remembered the covenant spoken to him, and renewed resolve began to wash over him. He wiped his face, lifting the helm of sorrow slightly from his brow. "Then I shall rise. May the Lord give me strength to lead, even with my heart in anguish." As he steadied himself amidst the tumult, tidings of victory reached his ears, but with it also tales of the strife yet to come. News of Absalom's death ignited celebrations among some, yet others mourned the loss of a son in the wild grasp of rebellion. And standing before the kingdom was the solemn task of restoring unity. The news spread throughout Israel like a ripple upon a still lake, stirring emotion in every heart. Among the people, some rejoiced over the fall of Absalom, while others wrestled with the gravity of the moment, for they had witnessed God's hand. The air throbbed with confusion as factions began to emerge, dividing over grief or ambivalence towards the king's command. In the weeks that followed, David sought solace in the divine. Night after night, he poured his soul into the songs of lament, weaving words of poignant sorrow and hope together as one. "Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and uphold me with a willing spirit." Psalm 51:12. Each prayer reached toward heaven, seeking peace amidst chaos. Then, while he rested, a vision stirred within him, a prophetic moment fashioned by the Lord himself. He saw a throne shining brightly against a backdrop of darkness. And in his heart he knew, the seed of promise shall endure, and I must prepare him, for the times ahead will still speak of his glory. Rising with a newfound clarity, David gathered the leaders of his council. "Hear me, people of Israel. The Lord of hosts has not abandoned us. For though we have mourned deeply, we are called to a purpose, one that claims victory not just against our enemies, but within our very hearts." He spoke of a future, a destiny intertwined with the grace of the Almighty. But unknown to David, the currents of destiny churned. Darker schemes silently plotted in the shadows of Israel. For every upturn of promise beckoned a deeper testing. Would the hearts of men remain steadfast, or would another rise up against the anointed of the Lord? In this tumultuous moment, when hope shimmered like the last light of day, the sovereign plan of God whispered through the air, hinting at a rising king who would bring both judgment and salvation. For the path to redemption is often paved with trials unseen, paving the way for a legacy that would echo through eternity. What treasures of grace lay hidden in the story yet to unfold? The heart of a nation still awaited its true king. And it came to pass, as David steadfastly sought to unite the people of Israel, that a murmuring arose among the tribes. Men whispered in corners, their eyes darting with uncertainty. "Has David indeed sought the Lord?" they questioned. What of the blood that has been shed? Is our king a man after God's own heart, or one who leads us into further grief?" David, sensing the unrest, called for a gathering. "Let all the leaders of Israel come forth," he declared, his voice full of authority tempered with humility. "I stand before you a king who has tasted both the depths of despair and the heights of God's mercy. Come, let us speak of the path ahead." As the leaders assembled, David raised his arms, commanding silence. "We have mourned a son, for Absalom was my flesh and blood. Yet we must not forget the covenant of promise. The Lord has chosen me as your king. He has made a way even when the road seemed dark." In that moment, the Spirit of the Lord fell upon him, and he uttered words with weight beyond his own. Let us remember the words of the prophet Samuel, who poured oil upon my head and anointed me king over Israel. 1 Samuel 16:13. The Lord has not forsaken his covenant. We shall rise again, united under the banner of his promise. And so, in the face of both grief and ambition, David moved to restore the tribes, sending emissaries throughout all the land, to proclaim, "The king still lives. Return to your rightful places, for the Lord our God shall lead us into a new season." As the months unfolded, David's words kindled flames of fervor in the hearts of many. Yet lurking in the shadows was a man named Sheba, a son of Bichri, who incited dissension among the people. "We have no portion in David," he cried, forging factions of rebellion. "To your tents, O Israel! What has David done for us?" The anger of Sheba spread like wildfire as hearts turned away once again from the king. David realized that new trials were emerging, as just as hope was cultivated, ungratefulness sought to take root. He sent Joab and the soldiers of Israel to pursue the rebel, for he feared that division would destroy the land. Through the thick of battle, Sheba fled to a city named Abel of Beth-Maacah, leading his band of insurgents down a path paved by pride. As Joab and his men laid siege to the city, a wise woman cried out from the walls, "Hear me, pursuers of destruction! Why lay waste to our beloved city? We are peaceful. Why should an innocent suffer for the folly of one?" "Bring out the man Sheba," Joab demanded, the sword of justice poised for action. Yet the wise woman, filled with courage, replied, "Wait, what if we deliver him? Let the one who has stirred strife pay for his rebellion, and we shall secure peace for our people." And as the plan took shape within the heart of the city, it served as a reminder: the path to reconciliation is often laid through the humility of others. In that moment, the hearts of men turned toward the light of reason, and the sword thirsting for blood became a catalyst for resolution. Thus Sheba was delivered, and with his head sullied by the grief of his own rebellion, the siege was lifted. David, usefully reminded that peace was born of mercy, received the news that morning, and, though wearied, he offered a prayer. "O Lord, grant us strength to lead with wisdom amidst despair, lest we fall prey to the darkness that calls our hearts to strife once more." But as peace settled over Israel, David took heed, for he sensed that deeper challenges were yet to come. For the Lord's plan was not yet complete. The heart of a nation lay before him, a treasure mapped out in a future unknown. And there lingered the question in the air: what greater trials would arise, and how would the faithful navigate the darkened valleys ahead? The echoes of God's sovereign purposes stirred restlessly, heralding a new chapter that awaited its unfolding. And it came to pass, when the sound of the siege had faded, and the city of Abel was restored to peace, that David found himself seated in the courts of his palace, reflecting on the mercies of God. The nation had witnessed yet another turmoil, but now rejoiced in the deliverance that had come through wisdom and sacrifice. Yet the heart of the king was restless. As David sought solace in prayer, he recalled the oracles of old, the words of Nathan, which lingered like a whisper destined to resound from generation to generation. When your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, I will set up your seed after you, which shall proceed out of your bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. The promise echoed in his spirit, weaving a tapestry of hope intertwined with dread. Would his descendants remain faithful? Would they uphold the covenant established with their forefathers? The vision of a strong lineage pressed upon him, yet the shadow of rebellion loomed ominously still. The very fabric of Israel seemed splintered, and he feared what might become of them. Thus the Lord stirred David's heart, prompting him to send for Zadok the priest and Abiathar the priest. "Gather the Levites and the chief of the tribes," he instructed, "for I desire to call upon the name of the Lord in unity, that we may seek his face for guidance." The response was swift, and soon the sacred assembly was convened. As the priests adorned in their linen garments approached, a tremor of anticipation filled the air. David took his place before the altar, and with arms extended like a supplicant before the heavens, he beseeched the God of Israel. "O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob," he prayed earnestly, "you have made a covenant with your people, yet we find ourselves scattered and torn by strife. Direct our paths, I implore you, and do not let the enemy triumph over us. Raise up a generation that knows you, that walks in your ways, that fears your name." And even as he prayed, the Spirit of the Lord fell upon the assembly, enveloping them in a holy hush. In that moment, a prophet arose among them, proclaiming, "Hear the word of the Lord. For the God of Israel has declared, though the enemy rages, the king shall not be moved. In the trials ahead, I will strengthen my people. A new heart shall be birthed among the nations, a heart that seeks me, a heart that walks in righteousness." The proclamation sent waves of hope cascading through the gathered crowd. Yet within David's heart, questions lingered still. The promise of the Lord was weighty, and his spirit sought understanding. He turned his gaze towards the horizon, recognizing the tumult beneath the surface of peace. Days passed, and as David resumed his responsibilities as king, matters of state required his attention. Letters from distant regions bore news of discontent, as neighboring nations stirred with malice. The fragile tranquility was a facade most perilous. Amidst this turmoil, a messenger arrived bearing grim tidings. "The Ammonites and the Edomites conspire against you, O king. They seek alliances and harbor wicked schemes." Dread filled David's heart. He gathered his forces, though concern gnawed at his spirit. How could he protect his kingdom while wrestling with the legacy of his dynasty? Yet, in the quiet moments alone, he felt the Lord's presence lingering. "Remember the words of the prophet," he whispered to himself. "In unity my people shall rise." It was then that a startling realization pierced his thoughts, that through these trials God was weaving a divine narrative wholly unlike any he had previously comprehended. Would these challenges not unearth the depths of the people's faith as well as sharpen their resolve? David understood. Trials weren't merely hazards, but divine opportunities. Each struggle would shape their character, as gold is refined by fire. And in the heart of that refining, God's purposes would unfold. Thus, as his forces prepared for battle, a resolve took root within him. "Come what may," he proclaimed to his commanders, "we shall rise united, not just as soldiers, but as a people set apart for his glory. For in strength and in weakness he shall be glorified." And yet, as the dawn settled over the land, David's heart trembled anew, pondering how far the kingdom must be driven towards darkness before it could behold the light of redemption promised. The path of the divine awaited, inscribed not only in the heart of the king, but poised to encompass a nation. What ultimate purpose would God reveal in this high-stakes dance of faith? And it came to pass that as David convened his commanders and fortified the defenses of Jerusalem, the weight of impending conflict bore heavily upon his shoulders. The air crackled with tension, for every warrior sensed the stirring of shadows upon the horizon. Yet, beneath the tumult, the Lord's promise arose like the morning sun, illuminating the path ahead. One night, as David lay restless upon his couch, a deep sleep fell upon him, and there came to him a vision from the Lord. He beheld a great tree, vast and enduring, its roots penetrating the depths of the earth, and its branches reaching toward the sky. Amidst its foliage, a voice thundered, "Behold, I shall bring forth from you a sprout that shall bear fruit in due season, and through him my covenant shall be established forever." Upon awakening, David's heart was filled with awe, for he understood the symbol. The tree was his house, and the sprout his son, destined to lead Israel into a future of divine blessing. He pondered deeply how such a promise could resonate through the ages, intertwining his lineage with the very purposes of God. The following day, David commanded that preparations for battle be escalated. He summoned Joab, his mighty commander, and spoke resolutely, "Gather the warriors of Israel, for the Ammonites and Edomites dare to defy the living God. We shall march against them, but first let us seek counsel from the Lord, that we may be led in his ways." As the armies rallied, the sacred vessel of the ark was brought to the camp, and the Levites praised the name of the Lord with trumpets and the sound of harps. The atmosphere was charged with the reverence of the Almighty, and David offered sacrifices of worship, proclaiming, "O God, you are our refuge. The enemy cannot prevail against us if we take shelter under your wings." Yet that night, as the darkness cloaked the land, a shadow emerged among the Israelites. A messenger, cloaked in urgency, approached David with tidings. "The hearts of the people grow fearful, O king, for rumors of your own son, Absalom, stir within the city. He speaks of taking the throne into his hands." David's heart sank. Absalom, chosen of God, possessed beauty and charm, yet the seeds of pride had taken root within him. David felt the sting of betrayal pierce his spirit. "Call for the officers of the people," commanded the king, for he sought not only to quell rebellion, but also to reach the heart of his son, a heart that once loved and admired him. As the leaders gathered, David implored, "What must we do? For my own blood seeks to rise against me. Should we confront him? Or should we treat him with grace, hoping the bond of love may still be salvaged?" A murmur arose among the officers, opinions divided between honor and mercy. Yet, in the midst of this tumultuous council, a wise elder spoke forth, "Let us not descend into bloodshed among our own, for if we do, we may lose that which no sword can slay, unity and the very heart of the nation." David considered the counsel, and though it grieved him to allow such treachery, he resolved to seek peace. "Then I will go," he declared, "to face my son not as a king, but as a father who longs for reconciliation. I shall not descend into darkness, lest we all perish in the night." And so it was that in the shadow of coming trials, the heart of David bled with a longing for restoration, for he understood the weight of legacy lay not just in crowns, but within the bonds of love. As he stepped forth into the night, he sensed the profound workings of God amidst the chaos, for even in the face of ruin, the promise of a new heart awaited to be revealed, shaped by the crucible of strife and love. Yet within the depths of the unfolding conflict lay an uprising that would soon test not only David's courage, but the very design of God's sovereign will. How would this familial storm reveal the ultimate redemption woven through the tapestry of Israel's future? And it came to pass that as David ventured forth, the distant echoes of his son's voice rang through the air, sweet as honey, yet laced with bitterness. Absalom, with his charming demeanor, had gathered a following who longed to witness the dawn of a king untainted by the weight of iniquity. As David approached the city gates, he gathered his resolve, desiring not conflict, but the restoration of a familial bond. "Bring forth my son," he called into the night, his voice steady, yet filled with a father's sorrow. The soldiers around him held their breath, sensing the sacred tension of a father's plea waging war against a son's rebellion. And lo, the figure of Absalom appeared, his hair flowing like the cascading rivers of Lebanon, a sight magnificent, yet a heart now ensnared by pride. David's gaze met his son's, and in that moment time stood still, unspoken words heavy in the air. "Absalom, Absalom, my son, David cried, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Why have you turned your heart against me?" Absalom, with a defiant spirit, responded, "Father, the people grow weary of your rule. They seek a king who listens to their cries, one who defends them from injustice. For your heart is blind, and your decisions often bring shame upon our house." The words cut through David like a dagger, yet he beheld his son not with anger, but with deep melancholy. "You possess the beauty of youth, Absalom, but all wisdom comes from the Lord. Do not forsake the path of righteousness for a fleeting crown." Yet the turmoil in the hearts of men is a tempest difficult to quell. The whispers of deceit surged among the people, who clamored for Absalom's rule, their hearts captivated by his allure. In the shadows, the spirit of division spread its wings wide, threatening to overshadow the very promise the Lord had spoken to David. As night deepened, David turned his heart toward the Lord in prayer, seeking guidance amidst the chaos enveloping his household. In the stillness of the night, he called upon the covenant God. "O Lord, guide me as I tread these troubled paths. I seek not vengeance, but peace, for this son of my loins is ensnared by pride." At the dawn of a new day, as the sun broke through the darkness, a servant hastened toward David with tidings. "O king, Absalom rallies the people against you. He rides into Jerusalem with great fanfare, declared king by those it seems you have failed." David's heart quaked within him, but he steeled himself, recognizing the sovereign will of God even in despair. "Gather the people, those still loyal, that we may flee from Jerusalem. For if we do not act, the city may be lost to us," he commanded. And thus the king arose, leading those faithful few into the hills, carried by a mixture of dread and unwavering trust in the Lord's purpose. As they departed, David wept bitterly, yet he remained steadfast in faith, knowing that glory arises through trial and shadows can reflect divine light. On the mountaintop, as David paused, his heart echoed with the promises of generations. A sprout shall rise from his lineage, intertwining with the tumultuous fate of Israel. "Though the storm rages," he whispered, "your covenant stands firm, O God. May my son's heart, hardened by pride, one day be softened by your love, for your ways are higher than ours." In that contemplative moment, a revelation dawned within him. Was this conflict merely an overture to a greater purpose? A divine reminder that redemption often arises from the ashes of betrayal? Yet as the king wiped his tears, another question stirred in his heart. Would Absalom turn back to the God of his father? And how might the intricate design of the Almighty unfold through the turmoil of this familial divide? And it came to pass that David, burdened yet unwavering, walked the paths of the hills. His loyal warriors encircled him, their faces etched with worry, yet their hearts bound in loyalty to their king. As twilight began to wrap its gentle arms around the landscape, David paused, looking out upon the horizon. "Gather the musicians," he commanded with a trembling voice. "Let us raise a song unto the Lord, for even in sorrow we shall not forget to praise his name." And thus the sound of harps and voices filled the air, resonating with the deep longing of David's spirit. "O Lord my God, in you do I take refuge. Deliver me from all my pursuers and save me," he sang, echoing the words that would later be inscribed in the Psalms, for the heart of his turmoil bore the seed of his worship. Yet, as the songs arose, a servant came running, breathless and pale. "My lord, Absalom has taken the city. The hearts of the people are with him. They murmur against you in the streets of Jerusalem, calling for your blood." A sharp pang pierced David's heart, but he spoke with a voice steadied by the presence of God. "The Lord reigns. Let the earth rejoice. If we must face this trial, may it be for his glory. We shall go further into the wilderness, for we shall not yield our lives when the Lord our God still has a purpose for us." As they journeyed deeper into the mountains, the faithful gathered around David, listening earnestly to the wisdom of their king. "Fear not, for we serve a God who is mightier than all schemes of man," he reassured them, his voice carrying the weight of his sorrow, yet filled with hope. At the break of the next dawn, as the sun's rays kissed the earth, a voice echoed through the mountains. It was Hushai the Archite, a loyal friend and servant of David. "My lord, I have come to warn you. Absalom has asked for counsel, and this is what the Lord has spoken. He shall pursue you fiercely, yet you shall not be overcome." "Pray tell, how shall I counter his plans?" David implored, his heart seeking in the midst of discord. "Let me go back to Absalom and speak wise words that will cause him to delay his attack," Hushai responded with a resolute heart, "for the Lord desires to grant favor to you and his people." And David, burdened yet hopeful, nodded, for he saw in Hushai's words a glimmer of divine intervention. Yet amidst the unfolding events there lay a somber weight, the reality that his beloved son was consumed by ambition, blind to the peril that lay in the shadows. Would he ever see Absalom's heart restored to its rightful place? Meanwhile, in Jerusalem, the tumult grew, as Absalom, intoxicated by his newfound authority, became a reflection of the very pride that had ensnared him. "Bring me counsel," he demanded of Ahithophel, whose wisdom was renowned among the people of Israel. The sin of the father now seemed to echo through the son. Rebellion against the Lord brought forth calamity. Yet within the heart of David a flicker remained, a divine promise unshaken. He fell to his knees, crying out, "God of my fathers, give Absalom soft words of reproof, that mercy may yet find him." As the sun set over the distant hills, David remained in keen silence, the burning question now at the forefront of his spirit, weighing heavy. Would the love of a father be enough to pierce the armor of pride? And as darkness cloaked the land, a storm of purpose brewed, for God's sovereign plan was yet to unfold. But as the winds stirred, what new revelation awaited them at dawn? And would not the heart of Absalom's journey reveal the depth of the Almighty's grace, even amidst rebellion? And it came to pass that in the tumult of David's heart, amidst the rising tensions and the shadows cast by pride and rebellion, the Lord remained ever vigilant, crafting a narrative far greater than the pain that now enveloped the kingdom of Israel. As David wandered the mountains, seeking refuge from the storm of his own blood, He clung to the unyielding promise of God, that his lineage would endure and reveal a greater king. In the days that followed, Hushai's counsel to Absalom bore unexpected results. The young usurper, intoxicated by his ambition, was drawn to the very depths of folly, the sin that arises from the heart ensnared by pride. "I will pursue David," Absalom roared, oblivious to the divine warning echoing through the hearts of those still loyal to the true king. But in the royal encampment, David had not lost sight of his mission. He sought the face of the Lord with fervent supplications. "O Lord, mightier than all the storm, subdue the hearts of men before you. I long for the day when peace reigns once more, and unity flees not from the hearts of my people." As the armies prepared for battle, David's faithful men stood ready, their faith ignited by the assurance that God was with them. "We go forth not by might, but by your Spirit, O God. Let the battle belong to you," he declared, rallying their hearts under the banner of the Almighty. The inevitable clash ensued in the forest of Ephraim, where fierce combat would determine the course of Israel's destiny. As swords clashed and cries of valor rang out, the hand of God moved unseen among the branches, guiding the outcomes, orchestrating moments that seemed chaotic, yet were woven together into a divine tapestry. Amidst the strife, the wisdom of David rang true in the chaos. He had commanded his forces, "Protect my son Absalom," for even in conflict, a father's heart beat resolutely with love amidst looming tragedy. His prayers ascended like incense to heaven, blending with a heart yearning for redemption and reconciliation. Meanwhile, as victory turned toward David's army, the forest bore witness to a grave moment, the culmination of Absalom's ambition and pride. Caught by the very hair that had signaled his beauty, Absalom hung suspended between heaven and earth, a poignant reminder of the pitfalls of hubris. It was Joab who, guided by duty and the harsh realities of kingship, extinguished the flame of rebellion with the fatal blow. Yet with it he delivered David's heart into the throes of anguish. When the news of Absalom's fate reached the camp, David fell to the ground, his cries echoing into the heavens. "O my son, Absalom, would that I had died instead of you." 2 Samuel 18:33. In that moment, the weight of grief settled upon the land like a thick fog. The king's heart rended asunder, mourning not just a son lost to the rebellion, but a legacy at stake, echoed through generations. Yet within the depths of despair, God's purpose was being fulfilled. The seed of promise still thrived and awaited the generations to come. Yet beyond the tears of the king, a heart awakened within Israel. The chaotic winds of rebellion had stirred a longing in the people's hearts for back to the truth. Through trials and turmoil, the unwavering love of God remained steadfast. David rose, shaking off grief and grasping the hope embedded in his covenant with the Lord. "Gather my people, we shall not dwell in sorrow, but arise to worship." From the ashes of grief, David led the nation in a renewed commitment to seek the face of the Lord, fostering unity and restoration among the tribes. Though Absalom sought power, we are called to a greater purpose, to remember the Lord and his covenant, he proclaimed. The hearts of Israel turned again as David's reign restored what was lost. In time, the lineage of David would lead forth the ultimate king, the sprout of hope destined to shatter chains and bring redemption through love and sacrifice. As David sat upon his throne once more, fully aware of God's sovereign plan, he penned the words of lamentation and praise, weaving them into the Psalms, echoes of his heart that would journey through time, reaching into the souls of those in need of hope. "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Psalm 23:6. Thus, the story of David, the sacred king, continued, not merely a tale of triumphs and failures, but as a reflection of a compassionate God who, through trial, unveiled the depths of his love toward humanity, revealing his unwavering promise despite our frailties. And so we, beloved, are invited to embrace the lessons of this sacred unfolding, to remain steadfast in our journeys through life's valleys. For in the heart of brokenness there lies the potential for divine healing, and in the shadow of betrayal there awaits a promise of redemption. As you reflect on this story of David, I encourage you, subscribe immediately to our channel to not miss the next powerful biblical stories that can ignite your faith. Leave a like now to help spread God's word through the algorithm. Every click matters. Comment below your spiritual reflections on how this biblical narrative has impacted your faith journey. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear God's truth. Only believers like you understand how vital it is to support biblical content and spread the love of Christ to reach more souls.